You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood, art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today we're looking at Wayne Thiebaud. Wayne Thiebaud was born on November 15th, 1920 in Mesa, Arizona, but his family moved to Long Beach, California when he was just 6 months old. He would spend most of his life in California. During his high school years in Long Beach, he worked as a sign painter and as a summer apprentice at Walt Disney Studios in the animation department. While at Disney, he had the opportunity to learn about design, layout, and the creation of vivid, appealing imagery. This helped him to gain a keen understanding of visual communication and the power of simple, iconic forms. After graduating high school, Thiebaud held a variety of jobs, including working for a theater, a cafe, and serving in the U.S. Air Force during World War II. These experiences exposed him to different aspects of visual culture and broadened his understanding of how images are constructed and perceived. Following his military service, he returned to California and enrolled in Long Beach City College before transferring to California State University, Sacramento, where he earned his bachelor's, and then he went on to earn a master's degree. He also began his career as an art instructor teaching at Sacramento Junior College. Teaching proved to be an important aspect of Thiebaud's life, allowing him to continually engage with artistic principles and the development of visual literacy with others. He would later become a professor at the University of California in Davis beginning in 1960, and he continued teaching there for decades. And the math for his teaching career gets a little fuzzy because he was a part of the faculty for 30 years at UC Davis. He sort of formally retired in 1990, but then continued teaching for another 12 years. But back to his art. In the late 1950s, he spent a sabbatical year in New York City where he immersed himself in the art scene, including the burgeoning pop art movement. While his work would later be associated with pop art due to the focus on consumer goods, Thiebaud approached it a little differently. Many pop artists like Andy Warhol embraced mass production and even employed mechanical reproduction techniques. I mean, Warhol famously called his studio the factory and said he wanted to create like a machine. Thiebaud's work, though, emphasized the individual touch of the painter and the more nuanced exploration of form, color, and light. When he returned to California, Thiebaud began to focus on subjects that would become his signature, essentially diner food, things like pies, cakes, hot dogs, but also gumball machines and lipsticks. He painted these items with a distinctive style, thick impasto, bright colors, strong, often exaggerated shadows. Thiebaud's work really gained increasing recognition starting in the early 1960s, culminating with his inclusion in the influential New Painting of Common Objects exhibition at the Pasadena Art Museum in 1962. This is often considered one of the foundational shows of the pop art movement on the West Coast. Now, despite this association, Thiebaud always maintained a degree of independence from the pop art label, emphasizing his formal concerns with painting and his interest in art historical traditions, particularly still life arrangements. Throughout his career, Thiebaud continued to explore various themes beyond the iconic food subjects, including landscapes, particularly the steep streets and urban grids of San Francisco, and he did some figurative paintings. These works, while different in subject matter, often shared similar formal qualities: the meticulous attention to light and shadow, the sense of stillness, and the subtle exploration of the relationship between realism and abstraction. His unique vision and his dedication to the craft of painting made him one of the most respected and beloved American artists of the past several decades. Now, I want to take a moment to look at one of his early works that helped to launch his career. Pie a la Mode is oil on canvas, painted in 1961, and it's just so perfectly typical of Wayne Thiebaud's style. It shows us a single slice of pie on a simple white plate. The pie has a generous scoop of ice cream sitting on top, melting and beginning to drip down the crust. The somewhat lumpy, organic shape of the softening ice cream contrasts with the sharp, triangular form of the pie slice. The entire scene is set against a plain, neutral background, which forces all the attention onto the dessert. And I think the scale is also important here. While pop artists like Klaus Oldenburg were recreating small, commonplace objects on a monumental scale, the pie slice here is the only thing in the painting, and it feels small. The negative space overwhelms it to a degree that makes the whole painting feel smaller and softer. It feels almost calm, maybe a little bit isolated, but I don't know, there's a coziness to it too. And I think part of what makes this such a successful piece and so important for like the early 1960s is there's a painterly quality to his work that feels almost like a bridge from that sort of modern abstraction that was popular in the first half of the 20th century to the more flat, almost mechanical pop art that really dominated so much of the second half of the century. We see Thiebaud applies this heavy impasto, meaning the paint's laid on so thickly it stands out from the surface, creating a real texture. You can feel the creamy smoothness of the ice cream. Thiebaud famously said he would often preload his brushes with 2 or 3 different colors to create these vibrant outlines and shadows that define the objects. Here you can see those signature sort of halos of blue and violet outlining the plate and giving it a sort of energy. The painting is more than just a picture of the tasty treat, though. It's an icon of American culture. The subject, the pie with ice cream, is a classic symbol of comfort, nostalgia, and simple pleasures. Thiebaud painted these objects from observation and from memory, drawing on his experience working in restaurants and his fascination with the way that food was displayed in diners and bakeries. He isolates the slice of pie, treating it not just as a food, but as a carefully studied object of design, almost like an artifact in a museum. The thick, luscious paint makes the dessert seem desirable, but there's also this clinical sort of separation, keeping us at a distance and encouraging sort of contemplation rather than consumption. And pie a la mode gained widespread attention when it was included in that pivotal exhibition 1962 called New Paintings of Common Objects at the Pasadena Art Museum, as I mentioned earlier. This show is widely considered a landmark event and the first major museum exhibition of what would become known as pop art. It not only brought Thiebaud's work together with other artists like Warhol and Lichtenstein, the exhibition sort of validated their use of everyday commercial subjects like desserts, soup cans, and comic books as legitimate subjects for, quote, fine art. For Thiebaud, this inclusion of his work in the show helped to launch his career on a national scale. He occupied this sweet spot where his work was associated with a popular movement, but his style was still distinct. Instead of critiquing consumer culture with the mechanical-looking art like Warhol, Thiebaud celebrated the visual delight of his subjects through the loving, human touch of the brush. And Pie a la Mode stands up today as a work representing really what Thiebaud did best, finding the beauty and artistic complexity in seemingly simple or trivial things. And it invites us to not just see the world around us with fresh eyes, but also appreciate those little things that spark joy.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.